Despite the fall of Troy, fate wouldn't allow its complete destruction. Aeneas, the hero favored by Venus, carried the sacred relics, the household gods and his aged father Anchises, on his shoulders. From the vast wealth he possessed, Aeneas chose these precious items, along with his son Æneas, to take with him. Aeneas and his fleet set sail from Antandros, leaving behind the cursed Thracian land soaked with Polydorus blood. With favorable winds and tides, they reached the island of Delos, the sacred city of Apollo. Æneas, the king and priest of Apollo, welcomed Aeneas into his temple and home. He showed them the city, the dedicated temples, and even the 2 olive trees where Latona, Apollo and Artemis' mother, had once grasped for support during childbirth. After offering incense, wine, and sacrifices, they enjoyed a royal feast, reclining on couches and indulging in food and wine. Anchises, ever pious, addressed Æneas. "Forgive me if I'm mistaken," he said, "but when I first saw these walls, didn't you have a son and 2 sets of twins, daughters as well?" Æneas, his temples adorned with white fillets, replied, "Your memory serves you well, great hero. I was indeed a father of 5. But fortune can be cruel. Now I am almost bereft of them all." He explained the fate of his children. His son ruled the island of Andros, named after him. The god Apollo had granted him the gift of prophecy. Æneas' daughters, on the other hand, were blessed by Dionysus with extraordinary abilities. They could transform things into grain, wine, and olives. News of these gifts reached Agamemnon, the leader of the Greeks who destroyed Troy. He desired these gifts for his army and forcefully took Æneas' daughters, separating them from their father. The daughters fled, 2 to Euboea and 2 to Andros, their brother's island. Agamemnon's forces threatened war if the girls weren't returned. Fear overpowered familial love, and Æneas, lacking the military might of Aeneas or Hector, who defended Troy for 10 years, surrendered his daughters. Æneas' daughters, with their arms still free, raised them to the sky and pleaded with Dionysus for help. The god answered, but in a horrifying way. He transformed them into birds, the white doves sacred to his consort, Venus. After a night's rest and sharing stories, the time for departure arrived. King Æneas offered parting gifts to Aeneas and his family, a scepter for Anchises, a scarf and quiver for Æneas, and a special goblet for Aeneas. This goblet, a gift from Therses, an Ismenian guest, was crafted by the skilled Mylian Alcon. It was decorated with a long and intricate design. The goblet gifted to Aeneas was intricately decorated. It depicted a city with 7 gates. These gates served as the city's name, revealing its identity. Just outside the city walls, a funeral was taking place. Tombs, fires, and funeral pyres filled the scene. Women with unbound hair and exposed chests expressed their grief. Even the nymphs seemed to weep, mourning dried-up springs. Bare trees stood tall, devoid of leaves, while goats gnawed on the parched stones. In the center of the scene stood the daughters of Orion. One offered her breast, larger than any woman's, her throat exposed. The other, with a sword thrust into her valiant wounds, appeared to be dying for her people. The scene depicted her receiving an honorable funeral procession through the city and being burned in a prominent location. From the ashes of the virgin, to ensure the lineage wouldn't end, rose twin youths. Fame called them the Coroni, leading the funeral procession for their mothers. The detailed scene on the goblet continued to the top, which was embellished with gilded acanthus leaves. The Trojans, not to be outdone in generosity, presented Æneas with an incense box, a bowl, and a crown adorned with gold and jewels. Recalling their Teucrian ancestry, which traced back to Teucer, the Trojans set sail for Crete. However, they couldn't tolerate the air there for long. Leaving behind Crete's 100 cities, they yearned to reach the shores of Italy. A storm raged, tossing the Trojans about. The winged goddess Aello struck fear into their hearts as they sought refuge in the treacherous harbors of the Strophades Islands. They continued their journey, passing by the harbors of Dulichium, Ithaca, Same, and the Neritian region Odysseus' kingdom. They then spotted Ambracia, a land contested by the gods and now famous for the temple of Apollo of Actium. The scene on the goblet also depicted the stone transformed from a judge and the land of Dodona, known for its talking oak trees. Finally, they reached the Chaonian Bays, where the sons of the Molossian king, transformed with wings, escaped a fire. The Trojans' voyage continued. They reached the neighboring land of the Phaeacians, known for its beautiful fruits. They then sailed to Epirus, encountering Bothrodos, a city ruled by Helenus, a Trojan prince with prophetic abilities, and a place called New Troy. Having learned about their future from Helenus' prophecies, the Trojans proceeded towards Sicania, the island also known as Sicily. This island has 3 points jutting out into the sea. Pakinos faces south, Lilybaeum faces west, and Pelorus faces north. The Trojans entered through the northern part of Sicily. As night fell, their fleet reached the treacherous Zanclean Shoals, modern-day Messina. Here, they faced the dangers of Scylla and Charybdis, monstrous sea creatures guarding the narrow strait. Scylla lurked on the right side, while Charybdis, a whirlpool, churned on the left. While the Trojans navigated this perilous passage, the story of Galatea, a sea nymph, and Acis, a young shepherd, unfolded. Galatea, heartbroken by a cyclops named Polyphemus who was in love with her, confided in another nymph about her love for Acis. Galatea revealed how Polyphemus, a monstrous and violent creature, had developed a deep affection for her. He began to care for his appearance, combing his hair and trimming his beard, neglecting his usual wild behavior. Meanwhile, a prophet named Telemus arrived in Sicily and warned Polyphemus that Odysseus would take his one eye. Polyphemus scoffed at the prophecy, unaware of the truth that awaited him. The story of Galatea, Acis, and Polyphemus continues in the next passage. A wedge-shaped hill juts out far into the sea, and the ocean waves crash on either side. Here came the fierce Cyclops, Polyphemus, and sat in the middle. His woolly sheep followed behind, with no one to herd them. After he put down his pine staff, which was better suited for a ship's mast, and picked up his pipe made of 100 reeds, the mountains echoed with the shepherd's music. Even the waves were aware of the sound. I, Acis, hidden inside a rock and lying in the arms of my beloved Galatea, caught these words from afar and stored them in my memory. Galatea, you are fairer than the snow-white privet leaf, more beautiful than the meadows, slimmer than the tall alder, brighter than glass, more playful than a young kid, smoother than pebbles worn by constant floods, more delightful than the winter sun or the summer's shade, lovelier than apples, more majestic than the lofty plane tree, clearer than ice, sweeter than ripe grapes, softer than swan's down and curdled milk, and, if you would not flee from me, more beautiful than a watered garden. Yet you, Galatea, are wilder than untamed cattle, harder than an old oak, more fickle than the water, tougher than willow twigs and white vines, more immovable than these rocks, fiercer than a torrent, prouder than a peacock, more ferocious than fire, rougher than thistles, crueler than a pregnant bear, deafer than the ocean waves, more savage than a water snake you've stepped on. And what I especially wish you didn't have, you are faster not only than deer chased by loud barking dogs, but even faster than the wind and the fleeting air. Despite his complaints, for I witnessed all of this, Polyphemus rose in anger. Like a bull enraged when its heifer is stolen, he couldn't stay still. He stormed through the woods and familiar forests. Suddenly, the savage monster spotted me and Acis, who was unsuspecting and unaware of the danger. Polyphemus roared, I see you both. This will be the last embrace your love allows. His voice boomed as loud as a raging cyclops of his size should sound. Mount Etna trembled at the noise. Terror-stricken, I plunged into the nearby sea. Acis, the son of a hero named Æneas, turned and fled, crying out, Help me, Galatea, I beg you. Help me, her parents. Please accept me, for I am on the verge of destruction. The Cyclops gave chase and hurled a giant piece torn from the mountain. Though only the edge of the rock struck Acis, it completely crushed him. However, I did the only thing the fates allowed to save Acis. I transformed him into a being like his grandfather, the river god. Purple blood flowed from under the rock, but soon the redness began to fade. First, it turned the color of a stream muddied by rain, then gradually became clear. Then, the thrown rock split open, and through the cracks a tall, strong reed sprouted. Water gushed forth, echoing through the hollow mouth of the rock. As a wondrous event, a young man suddenly emerged, visible up to his chest, his newly formed horns encircled with twining reeds. Though larger and with blue features, he was still Acis. Even in this form, transformed into a river, he remained Acis. And the stream has ever since kept his ancient name. Scylla, however, doesn't trust herself in the open ocean. She wanders along the dry sand without clothes, or when tired, finds a secluded spot in the sea to cool off. Suddenly, Glaucus appears, a recent convert to the sea world. His transformation happened near Euboean Anthedon. He sees Scylla and, smitten, tries to talk to her in hopes of stopping her escape. Scylla flees in fear and reaches the top of a mountain near the shore. It's a large ridge with a single peak, curving over the waves and devoid of trees. She stops there, unsure of Glaucus' nature, monster or god. She admires his colors, his flowing hair, and the fishtail at the end of his body. Maiden, I'm no monster, no beast. I am a god of the sea. My power over the deep rivals Proteus, Triton, and Polyphemus. I was once human, but always devoted to the sea. Back then, I used to fish with nets and lines. The shore bordered a green meadow, half surrounded by water, the other half by grass. Untouched by grazing animals or buzzing bees, this meadow had never been cut by a mower. One day, I sat on the grass drying my nets. To count my catch, I laid out the fish on the meadow. But something strange happened. As they touched the grass, they started moving, flipping, and hopping around like they were back in the sea. Amazed and confused, I pondered the cause. Was it a god's doing or some strange herb? What herb could do such a thing? I thought. I reached out, plucked a piece of grass, and chewed it. The moment I swallowed the unknown juices, I felt a churning in my gut and a transformation within. I couldn't stay on land any longer. I cried out, "Farewell, land, never to be seen again," and plunged into the sea. The sea gods welcomed me and granted me similar powers. Oceanus and Tethys cleansed me of my mortality. A ninefold chant washed away any remaining guilt, and I was commanded to swim beneath 100 streams. There was no delay. Rivers from different springs and entire seas were poured over my head. This much I can tell you, what happened that's worth mentioning, and this much I remember. But I wasn't aware of what happened next. When I regained consciousness, I found my entire body completely different, not the same in mind or form. For the first time, I saw this beard, a deep green, and my flowing hair that I combed through the vast seas. I saw my broad shoulders, my blue arms, and the ends of my legs transformed into a fishtail. But what good is this form? What use is it to please the sea gods and become a god myself, if it doesn't move you? Glaucus continued speaking, ready to say more, but Scylla simply left the sea god. Enraged and hurt by her rejection, he headed towards the magnificent palace of Circe, the daughter of the Titan sun god Helios.